Welcome, realtors. Sorry for the delay. We're still all navigating meeting virtually and technology, and so we appreciate everybody hanging in there. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Owen Tyler, and I'm fortunate enough to serve as the NAR Federal Political Coordinator for United States Representative Joe Cunningham of the 1st Congressional District. We're honored to have Representative Cunningham here today and thank him for his leadership in DC, particularly while he deals with the coronavirus pandemic. Thank you, Congressman, for attending today. Any kind of quick remarks before we begin?
No, thanks for having me, Owen. And again, my apologies to those of you all on the line. Fully my fault for navigating my own computer. I've been spending a lot of time on Zoom, but this is the first time on go to my webinar. Let me silence a couple of these phones. But it's an honor to be here with you all here today. Owen and I have been working together for quite a while now, and enjoy seeing him every time he comes to DC and back here in the Low Country. But I'm looking forward to having a great, robust discussion on everything that's current and everything you all are dealing with. So take it away, Owen.
Great, thank you. Yeah, it's interesting. Between Zoom, Facebook, Instant Messenger, FaceTiming on iPhones, GoToWebinars, Google Hangouts, I'm never really even sure what mode I'm supposed to be on anymore. So Representative Cunningham, we polled our membership from across the entire state, not just the 1st Congressional District, and came up with some questions for you that the members had. And so I'm just going to jump right in, and what better thing to do than to start with a personal question. I mean, sometimes it's better to save those for last, but I think this is a timely personal question. You tested positive for COVID-19 on March 27th. And have only recently come out of self-quarantine. Can you share that experience with us? What made you go get the test? What were your symptoms? How are you doing now?
Yeah, of course. Thanks for asking. I got back from DC, I think this, early March, and I got back home and was in the office eating some leftovers and realized I can't, it's pretty bland. I went home and told my wife that the meatballs didn't have much taste this time around, which I wouldn't recommend to anybody. You can imagine how well that went over. But the next day, same thing, Chick-fil-A, no taste, which you immediately notice. And I just thought it was odd. I thought I had allergies or something. And a couple days after that, I get a call from the Cunningham house physician, the house doctor, saying you come in contact with somebody who tested positive for corona and you need to self-quarantine yourself. And so I did, and I was there for a few days, and then I started looking at my phone. I see this news story pop up, I think from New York Times, saying that lack of taste or smell could be an indicator having coronavirus. So obviously my mind starts racing. The House is getting ready to call people back up to vote on this $2.2 trillion spending bill. And I didn't want to get back and get on an airplane or expose other people. I would have been coming out of quarantine around the same time, but I didn't want to do that if I was positive. So I went at MUSC.care, took their exam over the internet, and then qualified to take a test. Went in, took a test, found out I was positive. The representative, I think I may have gotten it from, Congressman Ben McAdams from Utah. He's a freshman. He was in the hospital for I think 8 days, laid up. Really, hit him really hard. Him and I are about the same age, but it kind of taught me kind of the breadth of impact this thing can have. And there's probably lots of people walking around right now who have it and don't know it and are carriers. And I think that's one of the more scary things about this virus is that a lot of people probably just walking around chalking it up to allergies, saying they can't taste or smell anything, not knowing that they may actually be passing off to people who are more vulnerable. But the impact is very wide. And I was blessed and fortunate to not only to have very mild symptoms, but I came out of quarantine April 1st. Been feeling great, ever since then. And even when I had the virus, we still weren't down and out. I was doing calls and things like that from our home. But as I'm sure a lot of folks on the phone call joining us right now know, working at home with little kids is no easy chore. But we're in the same situation as a lot of other Americans are now too, though.
Yeah, hey, it's not just kids, it's dogs and wives and husbands and roommates and everything else. It puts us in a whole different.
I've got mine.
See, I should have brought Graham out. I've locked him out of the room today though, because he's too much of a distraction.
Yeah, this
So
guy, he's pretty low key though. So sorry for the distraction.
no, no, you're good. So I'm assuming you have a message for South Carolinians that aren't taking social distancing seriously.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, learn from my experience. I know firsthand how easily this virus is caught and spread, and luckily I was in quarantine for over a week, before my diagnosis, which limited my contact with other people. But it's those with the mild symptoms like mine, or those who are asymptomatic, who are at a huge risk of spreading this to other people. So I know how hard and challenging this is, but each and every one of us have a role to play in stopping the spread of it. And by staying home as much as possible, by practicing social distancing, we can slow the spread of this virus, and we can protect healthcare workers, those who are sacrificing so much being on the front line. And we can keep our community safe, and we can return to our normal way of life as soon as possible.
It's great. And I think that's so important to, that's one of the things that we have stressed through the realtor community throughout the entire state is that, even though we're deemed an essential service for what we do, it's still not out there running around and doing open houses and showing
Yeah.
property on a daily basis. We all have that obligation, and that I think that ethical responsibility as hopefully good people to like protect those who are at risk. And so I appreciate those comments.
And that's probably particularly challenging for y'all's line of work too. I mean, like mine, we all, engage a lot with other people, and that, we're all, we like that, and we enjoy that. So I think it's particularly tough for some professions more than others. I think realtors are probably one of them at the top too.
I had a realtor tell me the other day that if he couldn't hug a client, he was out of business, which I think speaks a lot about how realtors feel about their clients, and how realtors feel and how clients feel about their realtor.
Yeah.
They become part of your life and your family. And when we all get to this complete computer virtual world, it takes something away to some degree. The majority of questions we received are related to the South Carolina Department of Employment and Workforce, which I certainly know is not a department that you oversee. So I want to be clear, we know that that is not something that you are direct their duties all the time. But the questions specifically were, when will that website allow realtors and other independent contractors to file for unemployment? People are going to it. Applications are currently being denied. Have you received any information? Have you heard anything?
Yeah, our office has been in touch with the governor's office, and the SC Department of Employment and Workforce announced recently that they anticipate being able to accept claims for PUA no later than the week ending April 25th. And so, we've been receiving calls from gig workers who are not able to process their applications. And like I said, our office has been in touch with the governor's office just yesterday, and we were reassured that these newly eligible individuals will receive their benefits. It's just a matter of the system being updated. And they said that the system is automatically denying applications, but are queuing up those folks to be contacted on April 25th. So long story short, they're recommending that folks still apply, but to expect to receive the denied notice, which is normal.
The second most common kind of questions were related to the Small Business Association payroll protection program, and anyone who cuts on any media, whether it be the news or reads the paper or any channel, everything is being reported. And what our members are reporting is that banks are just refusing applications. They're refusing applications based on you might not have an account with us, or you haven't been with us since February 17th. And now the latest news is, I guess we're running out of money, or we ran out of money maybe 15 minutes ago, or in 15 minutes. What can be done to address all of this so that the people that really need the payroll protection program can access that money?
Well, let me start by saying that we are working on shoring up PPP, and additional funds should be coming down the pipeline. I've been told that we could vote on this as early as tomorrow. I saw some sources saying that, but so we're all working on getting something behind the current existing funds, which recently run out. But let me just say that, it appears, and I talked to the South Carolina Bankers Association yesterday afternoon, and it appears that banks are prioritizing the applications of individuals who have a previous loan history with the bank. And you have to think in some way it makes sense since all their information's on file, since may have been approved before, or may have a history with them. So there's not as much background check or other research. But I'd encourage everybody to go to SBA.gov to find available lenders near you, and they have a search box there. And I think it's important to remember that there are some online lenders, including PayPal and Intuit, that were recently approved to participate in the program as well. The next stimulus package is intended to supplement the PPP to ensure that people aren't left behind. So we're working hard on that end to make sure that folks aren't left behind. And certain folks who have maybe you have a business, you have 8 different branches or 3 different branches. Some businesses I've talked to are applying for one PPP loan for all of them, and some of them are applying through 5 or 6 and spreading them out through different banks. That's a decision that businesses will have to make, but that would be my recommendation to that question, though.
Kind of following up on that, I guess, is kind of multifold question. Is Congress going back in session next week? And regardless of whether y'all return next week, are you going back, and what do you expect the House to be working on? We're hearing, about an additional packages. What's in those packages? What is the House pushing for, and what are you pushing for?
Mm-hmm. Well, barring any unforeseen circumstances, I don't think Congress is expected to fully return until May at the earliest. But if all sides are able to come together in agreement on any any of the response legislation to COVID, Congress is still able to pass additional legislation needed to help families and small businesses get through this crisis. We're able to pass that supplemental, the $2.2 trillion supplemental funding bill through a voice vote without having all members present. As far as your question on what we're pushing for, I recently just sent a letter to congressional leadership to advocate for low country priorities. And I'd be happy to share that with you all and send it to you, Owen, so you can disseminate among the group. I asked that future response legislation expand financial support for the tourism and hospitality industry. We know it's the backbone of the economy down here in South Carolina. We asked to ensure that healthcare workers and first responders have the resources they need. We've asked to provide direct funding to small cities and municipalities, and to support our service members who are helping us, in responding to this crisis. So those are a few of the things, but like I said, I'm happy to send you that letter, and you can share that with others as well.
That'd be great. I think, every time you turn on the news or every time we read something, you hear about additional legislation. So it's good to hear that that voice votes are still in effect, and that things can still be done without people being all in the same room and in DC. Talking about bills, realtors are currently supporting a remote notary bill that's in the Senate. And remote notary, you're an attorney, you know all about notaries. Remote notary, we see as a huge benefit to us, particularly in this time when people are quarantined, people are self-quarantining, there are stay-at-home orders all over the country. Do you have an opinion on remote notary? Do you see that moving to the House, and do you have any idea of what future legislation should be regarding remote notary?
Yeah, well, I think there's 2 aspects of the state and the federal side of it. I can only speak to the federal and the position there. I can tell you our office has received phone calls about this, including several people who have written in. For remote notary to be allowed, South Carolina would have to change its state laws to allow that. The Senate bill does not have a House equivalent yet, and as it stated, it would authorize remote and electronic notary from the federal level and get rid of the patchwork regulations that across the state. So Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have already released guidance that they will, accept remote notary for the federally backed mortgages they purchase and secure, which is good. Clears one hurdle. The Senate bill, from what I'm aware, is bipartisan, and I'd be willing to take a hard look at it. That's usually the type of legislation that we jump onto. But if and when it comes to the House, I'm more than happy to take a hard look at it. And like I said, I would encourage, obviously, y'all reaching out to state legislators as well to make that ask on that end.
Remote notary in the state for us has been on our legislative agenda. But as you can imagine, it's hard to get a lot of stuff done at the moment. Yeah. For anyone who is an elected official listening in the state of South Carolina. A lot of what's happening in our community are kind of like a drive-through closing type of thing, where people sit in cars and attorneys go out and paralegals go out and they sign and they pass paperwork back and forth. And I personally have to question if that is as good as a remote notary situation where people can sit and look at documents on a computer screen and ask questions and not feel rushed or uncomfortable about having to sit in a car and all like that. So anything you could do to help us with that, we would greatly appreciate. We had another question about credit scores. With layoffs, increased debt, people charging in an attempt to conserve cash to potentially make mortgage payments or buy food or pay for rent. Is there any kind of discussion in Congress about freezing credit scores? What can be done to protect people who are going to buy in the future? So if we are like this for 30, 40, 60 days and people begin running up huge amounts of credit and can't pay off existing credit lines of credit, be it mortgages or credit cards or home equity loans, all of that will affect the future purchasing power of a borrower. Is there anything Congress can do with that?
Yeah, it's my understanding that the members of the Senate Banking Committee have proposed a bill to safeguard the public's credit scores, which may be at risk as this outbreak continues. But if approved, that proposed bill would protect credit scores for those affected directly or indirectly by COVID-19 for up to 4 months, I believe, as well as provide unlimited free credit reports and scores for 1 year after the outbreak. And this bill would go through the House Financial Services Committee, of which I'm not a member, but happy to follow that too as it goes along, though.
What's kind of your take on legislation to help with federally backed mortgages, USDA, VA, FHA for unemployment? People are losing their jobs left and right. They're being furloughed. That, in theory, will go to an increase in foreclosure. South Carolina has one of the lowest foreclosure rates at this time, or did before this, almost non-existent. And is there anything that the House can do or the federal government can do to help that out?
Yeah, I mean, we get calls on this a lot too, and it's heartbreaking, obviously, as it's a deeply personal issue. The CARES Act, which we passed, has several provisions that protect the credit score for home buyers and those with student loans if a forbearance arrangement is made with the mortgage servicer due to COVID-19. That servicer must report to credit agencies the borrowers within the terms of the loan agreement. But the same goes for federally held loans. Payments are suspended until September and will be reported to credit bureaus as if they were paid. Fannie Mae, for instance, has created a liquidity facility for FHA, USDA, and the VA mortgages services. They're setting up a program to forward the principal and interest payment to investors for servicers who can't collect enough mortgage payments to stay afloat. I know there's a push by Senate Republicans to do something similar for FHFA loans, the ones backed by Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, especially after the director of the FHFA, Mark, is it Calabria? He made it seem unlikely, though. But from what we currently know, most banks have the liquidity to deal with the stall in the mortgage payments, and they're essentially prepared to deal with this for the time being. We know JP Morgan Chase has already announced changes to their lending requirements, but we kind of expect that to be just temporary. But from what we've seen so far, it seems like a lot of the mortgage companies have been very patient in dealing with this issue and letting this go a few months down the road. So hopefully that's something that we lesson we learned from back in 2008.
Yeah.
As
Yeah.
opposed to just kicking.
Right. Kicking it down to the road. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
For those on the call, Representative Cunningham is a member of the VA committee, and you're working to address veteran homelessness on that committee. Do you expect this pandemic to increase veteran homelessness? And are there any additional funds from the VA and the HUD to hire additional social workers, caseworkers? It would seem that they must be extremely overburdened at this time, just even trying to do check-ins. And is there anything else coming out of the VA committee that we might have an interest in?
I mean, I think going back to I guess the first question first. I mean, no American, especially those who have served our country, should have to suffer the indignity of not having a place to call home. And despite this national health crisis, I remain hopeful that that we can continue to make strides to reduce the veteran homelessness this year. Over the past decade, we've been fairly successful in reducing the nationwide veteran homeless population by like 50%. But as you know, I mean, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. There are some provisions in the CARES Act that protect veterans with VA home loans, as well as veterans living in federally secured housing from losing their homes. And that may not cover everyone, but hopefully the enhanced unemployment benefits and the financial support for businesses should help prevent veterans from falling behind on their rent or their mortgage payments. But as it relates to your last question, as it relates to me and my colleagues on the VA committee, we'll certainly continue to monitor the effect the public health crisis is having on our veterans, and we'll look for ways to mitigate those effects and follow up legislation. And with respect to the additional caseworkers, this is an issue that's been on our radar for some time. And part of the problem is that as of January, the VA had over 600 case management positions that were vacant. So we need to make sure that those are filled.
You recently had a bill signed in that you co-sponsored that helps veterans. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, we're thrilled about that. On Friday night, the president signed into law our veterans Tella hearing bill, which essentially if a veteran appeals their claims, they do not have to drive up to Columbia to sit in front of a board for their benefits. They can do that from the comfort of their own home, either on Zoom or go to my webinar like we're at today. But and it sounds like it may sound like a smaller issue, but it makes a huge difference in people's lives. I was recently on a ride along with the volunteers who go out and they pick up veterans and they take them to the VA hospital for their appointments. And you'd be shocked at how many veterans don't have either the funds to pay for a ride or the family or friends around who can give them a lift or the ability to transport themselves. So while a lot of us on this call may think, well, drive to Columbia is not too bad, for a lot of people it's a big deal. And so we're happy to get that bill. I mean, and it's a huge accomplishment for us to have one of our bills signed into law. So we applaud the president on that, on signing that, and everybody working together on it.
Wonderful. Thank you for the leadership on that. And you are so right. There's such an underserved population, and sometimes we get so caught up in our life that we forget that there are people out there who don't have the means to go across town, let alone go to Columbia. So that's great. A lot of investment properties and rental properties in the state of South Carolina are owned by individuals, mom and pop property owners, if you will. With tenants, not being able to pay, potential evictions on hold, what can be done to kind of help the small property owner, the guy who or woman who owns one investment property and they bought that and they're holding that to sell for their retirement. Is there anything under the CARES Act that helps multifamily commercial landlords, and in particular the mom and pop rental owner?
Yeah, I would say that, these rental property owners should I would encourage them to reach out to their mortgage servicers to find out how this obviously impacts their mortgage. I think that'd be the first step. The single family, the 1 to 4 unit rental property owners will have the same access as single family homeowners have for these things, and for multifamily, for 5 or more property units, for those rental property owners, they're eligible for access to forbearance for a period of 30 days, and with 2 extensions available, so for a max of 90 days total. These are all federally backed loans, which we have control of, and so if you have commercial landlords, you should encourage them to apply for the SBA loans and the grants to receive that assistance with keeping their businesses afloat. And that money can go to pay for rent, utilities, payroll, etc.
And yeah, I mean, it's amazing at how in depth the economic crisis goes when you start looking at one person not being able to pay their rent, and then that landlord not being able to pay their mortgage, or having to choose to pay the investment property mortgage or their primary residence mortgage. And it's a scary situation. We have time for one more question, and this is kind of a personal kind of what do you think question. What are the experts telling you how long this crisis will last? When is America going back to work? And something that kind of plays in my mind, do we believe that this will materially change the way we live and function as a country? Will we come out of this different?
Yeah, $1 million question, right, Owen? I mean,
We're asking you.
Yeah, I know. I just from a personal standpoint, I know how challenging this is for South Carolinians, and every day, I talk to members of our community who are struggling, either struggling small business owners or healthcare workers, or those who were recently laid off or furloughed. So I recognize how important it is that we get the economy back up and roaring like it was. But we got to do that when it's safe to do so, and which means that we have to wait until the medical experts and the national leaders give us the go ahead. In the I don't know if you saw it in the Post and Courier today, they've got a graph there, a line graph on the cases reported. So that's good to see too. So to know when we might be hitting that peak and when we might be able to get on the back end of that. I think on that back end of that is when hopefully we can start slowly getting things back to normal. It's obviously public safety and public health comes first. And while the economy is a factor, I think there's a lot of other things to consider as well. At some point, we have to start considering people's mental health by keeping them, people at home for so long. I mean, it's not commonly talked about, but it's becoming a real issue for a lot of people. These social distancing measures, have been difficult for people, but they're necessary to slow the spread of this virus. And it's important to remember, we're doing everything we can on the federal side. We also have a social responsibility as well as individuals to stop the spread of this virus, to flatten the curve, to respect that social distancing. We're a tight-knit community here in the Low Country. So, when one of us struggles, all of us struggle. We've been trying to do our best to promote these Low Country businesses that still have their doors open, because they're not just businesses, they're operated and run by our neighbors, our family, our friends. So, look, we've been through, tough times before in the past, and we've made it through, and we're going to make it through again. And I firmly believe that at the end of the day, we'll be stronger of a community because of it. You talk about what kind of lasting impressions this may have. I don't know. I would imagine there will be some residual impact that will be with us for years to come. I mean, we all remember after 9/11, people had a fear of flying that that materialized right after that. I'm not saying it's going to be that, but it's going to be something, you know, there's going to be some kind of effect after this for, you know, for a lot of people. I don't know exactly what that is, especially as it relates to social distancing, handshake, and that kind of stuff for people who engage one-on-one with people as much as realtors do, or I do in my job. So it's you know, I don't have a clear answer on that. But I do know, like I said, I do know we're going to push through this, and we will get to the back side of this. And I think everybody's going to be stronger and more of a community after that.
Yeah, I hope so, and I think that what we've seen in the realtor community and in the area that I live is that you know, people who wouldn't normally interact with one another are now and that people are helping each other out, and neighbors are speaking to each other that have never spoken to their neighbors. I might be that person who's never spoken to my neighbors and now speaking to them. That might be me, but I think that's kind of a part of it. For our viewers, we have placed two handouts on the screen for you, the Small Business Association FAQs from National Association of Realtors dated 4/10. And we have now uploaded some guidance from the South Carolina Department of Employment and Workforce Housing on the COVID-19 stuff. So thank you, Representative Cunningham, for talking to us about that.
Yeah.
If you asked a question that did not get answered, please email our legal team. They are always available, Byron at screaltors.org or Austin at screaltors.org, or you can always email Nick Cremitis at nick@southcarolinarealtors.org. Thank you, Representative Cunningham. Any additional comments or thoughts to share with our realtor members before we sign out?
Yeah, I'll apologize again for being a few minutes behind on the schedule, but I would just echo what you just said, Owen, talking about, you know, speaking with neighbors or reaching out to people that you may not have known before. I think it's important that as we're all in this together, be sure to reach out to those folks, family, colleagues, friends, especially the elderly who may find this time period a little bit more lonely than others. It's important to stay together and remain together at a social distance, of course, throughout this. But I appreciate everyone's time that jumped on the call, and you know, whatever our office can do to help, whatever questions you may have, we want to be that voice for you in the halls of Congress. So thanks again.
And thank you, Representative Cunningham. To echo on that comment, your staff is always so wonderful to the realtors. Special thank you to Panise, who keeps us engaged, and Lane and Jesse, who always provide that open door to you, and can always track you down for us when we have a question or need something. And you certainly do respond to your texts and personal phone calls from realtors. You have been a realtor champion, you and your staff, and we appreciate what you've done for us in the industry, and for always kind of being there and answering the questions. So thank you. Good health to you and your family, and everyone have a great afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.